Hello and welcome to The Essential Reads. My name is Isaac and my goal is to bring to you a bunch of classic audiobooks in an easy and accessible way. We are continuing with Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoyevsky, and this is Part 6, Chapter 4. Let's begin. You may perhaps know. Actually, I've already told you about it, Svidrigailov began, that I was locked up in the debtor's prison here, owing a tremendous sum of money, and without the slightest means in prospect for paying it. There is no point in going into all the details of how Marfa Petrovna bought me out when she did. Have you any idea of the degree of moral insensibility to which a woman is sometimes capable of loving? She was a decent woman. Not at all unintelligent, though completely lacking in education. Can you imagine? This same decent and jealous possessive woman took the step of condescending, after the most horrible scenes of frenzy and reproach, to form a contract with me. One which she adhered throughout the entire period of our marriage. The fact is that she was considerably older than me, and she constantly went around with some kind of clove in her mouth. I had enough brutishness in my soul, and enough of my own form of decency, to tell her right from the word go that it was quite out of the question for me to be faithful to her. That confession sent her into another frenzy. But I think that my crude candor actually appealed to her in a strange kind of way. It was as if she said to herself, he mustn't really want to deceive me if he's telling me about it in advance. Well, and to a possessive woman, that's the thing that counts most of all. After lengthy bouts of tears, a kind of verbal contract came into being between us. Its stipulations were that firstly, I would never leave Marfa Petrovna, and would always remain her husband. Secondly, I would never absent myself without her permission. Thirdly, that I would never retain a permanent mistress. Fourthly, that in return for this, Marfa Petrovna would occasionally allow me to cast an eye in the direction of the servant girls, but only with her confidential knowledge. Fifthly, that woe betide me if I were ever to fall in love with a woman of our own social class. And sixthly, that in the event, which God forbid, of my ever being visited by some grand and serious passion, I must confide everything to Marfa Petrovna. As a matter of fact, with regards to this last point, Marfa Petrovna was not particularly anxious. She was an intelligent woman, and consequently she was unable to look on me as anything other than a lecher and a libertine, for whom a serious love affair was an impossibility. But an intelligent woman and a possessive woman are two different things. And that was the trouble. Actually, if one is to form a dispassionate judgment about certain people, one must first of all jettison certain prejudices one may have, and also one's customary manner of dealing with the persons and objects that surround us. I think, therefore, that I am justified in relying on your judgment more than anyone's. You may already have heard absurd and ridiculous things about Marfa Petrovna. It's true that she really did have certain utterly ridiculous habits. But I will tell you straight out that I sincerely regret the innumerable unhappiness of which I was the cause. Well, I think that will do by the way of a thoroughly proper oraison funèbre, delivered by a loving husband over his loving wife. On the occasion when we quarreled, I would, for the most part, say nothing, and refuse to be provoked. And as a rule, this gentlemanly behavior paid its own dividends. It had its effect on her, and she found it ever appealing. There were times when she was even proud of me. But all the same, she couldn't stand your sister. And how on earth did she ever come to take the risky step of employing a raging beauty like that as a governess in her own home? I can only explain it by the fact that Marfa Petrovna was a passionate and susceptible woman, and that she had quite simply fallen in love, literally fallen in love, with your sister. Well, and so there was Avdotya Romanovna. I realized perfectly well, right from the first glance, that this was a bad business. And I determined, what do you suppose? Not even to look at her. But Avdotya Romanovna herself took the first step. Can you believe it? Can you believe, moreover, that Marfa Petrovna even went so far as to lose her temper with me for my constant silence on the topic of your sister, and for being so unmoved by her ceaseless and enamored outpourings about Avdotya Romanovna. I really still have no idea what she wanted. Well, and of course Marfa Petrovna told Avdotya Romanovna all about me, right down to the last detail. She had an unfortunate character trait that drove her to tell every single person our family secrets, and she used to complain to them incessantly about me. So why would she make any exception of her new and beautiful friend? I assume they talked of nothing but myself, and there can be no doubt that Avdotya Romanovna became acquainted with all those murky and mysterious legendary deeds that are ascribed to me. I would also venture to bet that you have also heard certain things of that kind. Yes, I have. Luzhin was accusing you of having caused the death of a child. Is that true? Please do me the favor of leaving those banal little stories alone, Svidrigailov said, turning away peevishly and with disgust. If you really must know all about that nonsense, I shall tell you about it separately sometime. But now, people have also told me about some menservant you had on your estate, and said that you were the cause of that, too. If you don't mind, that's enough, Svidrigailov broke in again with manifest impatience. Was that the same menservant who used to come and fill your pipe after he died? The one you told me about yourself? Raskolnikov asked, growing more and more irritated. Svidrigailov gave Raskolnikov a close look, and to Raskolnikov it seemed for a moment as though in that look there flashed like lightning a malicious smile. But Svidrigailov restrained himself, and answered with the utmost politeness, "The very one. I perceive that all this is of extreme interest to you, and I shall consider it my duty to satisfy your inquisitiveness on all these points at the earliest convenient opportunity. The devil take it! I see that it really is possible for me to appear as a romantic personage to certain people. Well then, I think you can judge for yourself the degree to which I am obliged to my deceased Marfa Petrovna for having told your sister so many mysterious and interesting things about me. I do not presume to know what impression it all made on her, but at any rate, it did me no harm. For all Avdotya Romanovna's natural aversion towards me, and in spite of my perpetually gloomy and off-putting air, she ended up feeling sorry for me. Sorry for a hopeless case. And when a girl's heart starts to feel sorry, that is, of course, the most dangerous thing that can happen to her. She immediately wants to rescue him, bring him to reason, reanimate him, exhort him to more noble aims, and breathe into him new life and new activity. Well, you know the sort of dreams they have along that line. I had once realized that the bird was going to fly to the nest of its own accord, and I, in my turn, made myself ready. You seem to be frowning, Rodion Romanich. Never fear, sir. The whole business ended in nonsense. The devil confound it. What a lot I seem to be drinking. You know, I always regretted the fact that destiny had not seen fit to bring your sister into the world in the 2nd or 3rd century AD, as the daughter of some small-time sovereign prince somewhere, or some ruler or proconsul in Asia Minor. She would, without any doubt, have been one of those who suffered martyrdom, and she would of course have smiled as her bosom was seared by the red-hot pincers. She would have walked into it all on purpose, and in the 4th or 5th century she'd have gone off to the Egyptian desert and lived there for 30 years, nourishing herself on roots, venison, and ecstasies. All that she's thirsting for, all that she demands is to accept torment for someone else's sake as quickly as possible. And if she doesn't get it, she'll probably jump out of the window. I've heard various things about a certain Mr. Razumikhin. They say he's a sober-minded fellow. Something in his name suggests he must be a seminarist. Well, let him look after your sister. In a word, I think I've understood her. Something I consider to my credit. But back then, back at the beginning of our acquaintance, you know how it is. One is always more stupid and frivolous when one sees things the wrong way, not as they really are. The devil take it. Why is she so good looking? It's not my fault. In a word, I got into all this because of a most uncontrollable surge of physical desire. Avdotya Romanovna is quite horribly, incredibly, unimaginably chaste. Please observe that I tell you this about your sister as a matter of fact. She is chaste to a point where it may be considered an illness, in spite of all her lofty intellect, and it will harm her. At the time, there happens to be a girl with us called Parasha. Dark-eyed Parasha, who had just been brought in from another village, a serving maid, and one whom I'd never set eyes on before. Very pretty, but unimaginably stupid. She burst into tears, raised a howl that could be heard all over the estate, and there was quite a scandal. One afternoon, Avdotya Romanovna came specially to see me when I was on my own in an avenue of the orchard, and her eyes flashing, demanded that I leave poor Parasha alone. This was almost the first time we had ever spoken to each other, tete-a-tete. I naturally considered it an honor to satisfy her wish. Did my best to pretend shock and embarrassment, and in actual fact played the role rather well. There began toings and froings, mysterious conversations, moral admonitions, beggings, beseechings, even tears. Can you believe it? Even tears. That's how intense the passion for propaganda gets in some of these girls. Well, of course, I blamed the whole thing on my unhappy lot. Pretended to be avid and thirsting for the light, and finally set in motion the principal and most unshakable technique there exists for the subjugation of the female heart. A technique that has never yet failed any man, and has the desired effect on every single woman without exception. This technique is the familiar one of flattery. There is nothing in the world more difficult than plain speaking, and nothing easier than flattery. If when a man is trying to speak plainly, 1/100th part of a false note creeps into what he is saying, the result is an instant dissonance, and following it, a scandal. In the case of flattery, however, even if everything in it, right down to the very last note, is false, it sounds agreeable, and is received not without pleasure. Even though it is a crude sort of pleasure, it's pleasure nevertheless. And no matter how crude the flattery may be, at least half of it always seems genuine. And that's how it is with people of all levels of education and from all layers of society. Even a Vestal virgin could be seduced with flattery. And where ordinary people are concerned, it's a positive walkover. I can never remember without laughing that time when I seduced a certain lady who was devoted to her husband, her children, and her virtue. How enjoyable it was, and how little work it involved. The lady really was virtuous, in her own way, at any rate. My entire tactical method consisted simply in being perpetually overwhelmed by her chastity, and in abasing myself before it. I flattered her outrageously, and no sooner had I attained so much as a squeeze of her hand, or even just a look from her, than I would reproach myself for having wrenched it from her by force, for the fact that she had resisted me, resisted so violently that I would very likely never have obtained anything at all if I weren't so depraved. That she, in her innocence, had not foreseen the insidious nature of my tactics, and had submitted inadvertently, without even knowing it or being aware of it, and so on and so forth. In a word, I got what I was after, and my lady remained in the highest degree certain that she was innocent and chaste, had fulfilled all her duties and obligations, and had only suffered this lapse quite by accident. Oh, how angry she was when I finally told her that, in my own sincere conviction, she had been just as much in search of pleasure as I. Poor Marfa Petrovna was also horribly susceptible to flattery, and if I had felt so inclined, I would have had her whole estate transferred to my name while she was still alive. I say, I really am drinking far too much and talking my head off. I hope you won't lose your temper if I mention now that the same effect had begun to make itself felt on Avdotya Romanovna. But I was stupid and impatient, and I spoiled the whole affair. On several previous occasions, and one of them quite decidedly, Avdotya Romanovna had told me that she thoroughly abominated the look in my eyes. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? She said, in so many words, that they contained a light that flared up ever more powerfully and recklessly, that frightened her, and had at last become hateful to her. There is no need to go into all the details. The fact is that we parted. At that point, I did another stupid thing. I launched myself into the crudest, most jeering tirade against all that propaganda and those attempts to convert me. Parasha reappeared on the scene. And not only her. In a word, there was chaos. Oh, Rodion Romanich, if only once in your life you could see the way your sister's eyes are sometimes capable of flashing. Never mind that, I'm drunk now and have just downed a whole glass of wine. I'm telling you the truth. I swear to you that I dreamt about those eyes. And in the end I couldn't even stand the rustle of her dress. I really thought I was going to have an attack of epilepsy. I'd never imagined that I might end up in such a frenzy. In a word, what I needed to do was to make it up with your sister. But that was out of the question. Just a fancy. What do you think I did then? The degree of stupefaction to which rage can drive a man. Never undertake anything when you are in a state of rage, Rodion Romanich. Reckoning that Avdotya Romanovna was, after all, not much more than a pauper. Oh, please forgive me, I didn't mean to. But, I mean, one word is just as good as another, isn't it? As long as it gets the sense across. That, in a word, she lived by the toil of her hands. That she had both your mother and yourself to maintain. Oh, damn, you're frowning again. I decided to offer her all my money. At the time, I could realize up to 30,000, so that she'd run away with me. Preferably here, to St. Petersburg. It goes without saying that I'd have instantly sworn eternal love to her. Bliss and all the rest of it. Can you believe it? I was so smitten that if she'd said to me, cut Marfa Petrovna's throat, or poison her and marry me, I'd have done it like a flash. But it all ended in the disaster which you are already familiar with. And you can judge for yourself the pitch my rage attained when I learned that Marfa Petrovna had got hold of that scoundrelly scribe Luzhin and had practically arranged the wedding, which was, in essence, the same thing I would have proposed. Have I got it right? Have I? Eh? I notice you've started to listen to me very attentively. Interesting young man. Svidrigailov struck his fist on the table in impatience. He had gone red in the face. Raskolnikov perceived beyond any doubt that the glass, or glass and a half of champagne he had drunk, sipping it unnoticeably in little swallows, had had a malignant effect on him, and he decided to take advantage of the opportunity. He regarded Svidrigailov with great suspicion. Well, after all, I'm quite convinced that you came to St. Petersburg with my sister in view, he said to Svidrigailov directly, and without any attempt at concealment, in order to irritate him even further. I say that's enough, Svidrigailov said quickly, as though he had suddenly gathered his wits. Look, I told you. And in any case, your sister can't stand me. Oh, I'm convinced of that, too. But that's not the point at issue now. Convinced, are you? Svidrigailov narrowed his eyes with a mocking smile. That's right. You're right. She doesn't love me. But never be too sure about the things that go on between a husband and a wife, or a lover and his mistress. There will always be one little corner that will remain obscure for the rest of the world, and which will only be known to the two of them. Are you so certain that Avdotya Romanovna looked on me with revulsion? From certain things you've said during the course of our conversation, I can see that even now you have your own ends in view, and that you have quite pressing designs on Dunya, which are, of course, villainous ones.
What? Did I say a thing like that?
Svidrigailov asked in utterly naive alarm, paying not the slightest attention to the epithet attributed to his designs. Yes, and you're saying them now. Well, what are you so afraid of? Why have you taken a fright all of a sudden?
Me? Afraid? Frightened? Frightened of you? It's rather you who ought to be afraid of me, cher ami. And in any case, what rubbish. Actually, though I'm a bit tipsy, I can feel it. I nearly said something I shouldn't have again. To the devil with this wine. Hey, bring me some water.
He grabbed hold of the bottle and hurled it without ceremony out of the window. Philip brought some water.
That's a lot of nonsense,
Svidrigailov said, wetting a towel and putting it to his forehead.
I can put paid to you with a single word and reduce all your suspicions to nothing. Are you aware, for example, that I am about to get married?
You already told me that before.
Told you, did I? I've forgotten. Well, if I did, it can't have been very definitive, as I hadn't set my eyes on my fiancée then. It was all just plans. However, now I do have a proper fiancée, and the deed is done. And if only I didn't have such urgent business to see to, I'd most certainly take you off to see her, because I want to ask your advice. The devil, I've only got 10 minutes left. You see, look at the time. But I'll tell you about it anyway, because it's an interesting little knick-knack. My marriage, in its own way. Where are you off to? Going again?
No, I'm not going anywhere now.
Not going anywhere? We'll see about that. Oh, it's true that I'll take you over there and show you my fiancée. Only, not just now. As now it will be soon time for you to go. You to the right, and I to the left. Do you know that Raskolnikov woman? The Raskolnikov woman whose apartment I'm staying in just now, eh? Are you listening? Come on, you know. The one they say was involved in the drowning of that slip of a girl in winter. Come on, are you listening? Are you listening? Well, it was she who cooked all this together for me. You look sort of dreary, she said. It's time you have some fun. Well, I mean, it's true. I'm a gloomy, dreary sort of fellow. Perhaps you think that I'm the cheerful type. Not a bit of it. I'm a gloomy chap. I don't bother anyone. Just stay in my room all the time. Sometimes I don't talk to anyone for 3 days. But that Raskolnikov woman is a rogue. I don't mind telling you. I mean, God knows the things she's got in her head. She thinks I'll get bored with my wife, desert her, and go off somewhere, and she'll be able to get her hands on her, put her into circulation in our social set. That is to say, only a bit higher. She says the father's some kind of enfeebled civil servant who's retired now, spends all his days in an armchair and hasn't used his legs for 3 years. She says there's a mother, too. The kind of woman who knows which side her bread's buttered on, the mother is. There's a son who's working in the service out in the provinces somewhere. Doesn't lift a finger to help them. One daughter's married and doesn't go to visit them. They have 2 little nephews to look after, as though their own kids weren't enough. And they've taken their younger daughter out of high school. She'll be just 16 in a month's time, and that means they can marry her off to someone. That someone is me. We went to see them. What a comical setup they have. I introduce myself, a landowner, a widower from a well-known family with certain connections, with capital. Well, so what if I am 50, and she's only 16? Who's going to take any notice? I mean, it's tempting, eh? It's tempting. You ought to have seen me talking to her mama and papa. It would have been worth paying just to watch me.
She came in, dropped a curtsy. I mean, can you imagine it? She was still in short skirts, an unopened budlet, blushing and blazing like a sunrise. They had told her, of course. I don't know what your preferences are concerning the female physiognomy, but if you ask me, those 16 years, those still childish eyes, that shyness and those tears of embarrassment. If you ask me, those are preferable to any beauty, and she's a picture even as it is. She has this flaxen head of hair frizzled up into little lamb-like curls, scarlet bee-stung lips, legs that are really something. Well, we introduce ourselves. I said I was in a hurry because of family business. And the following day, the day before yesterday, that is, we took the blessing. With that out of the way, whenever I go up there now, I immediately set her on my knee and won't let her down. She blushes like a sunrise again, and I cover her in kisses. Her mother naturally tells her that this is the man you're going to marry, and that when you're required to, in a word, it's a real pot of honey. Quite honestly, the status of fiancé that I occupy at the moment may even be preferable to that of husband. It involves what they call la nature et la vérité. I've exchanged intimacies with her on a couple of times. The little thing's not at all unintelligent. She gives me a secret glance. God, it burns right through me. You know, she has a little face like Raphael's Madonna. The Sistine Madonna has a fantastic face. The face of a sorrowful, holy fool. Didn't that leap to your eyes when you first saw it? Well, it's something in that genre. The very next day, after we'd taken the blessing, I brought her about 1,500 rubles worth of stuff. A diamond gewgaw, and a pearl one, and a silver lady's toilet box, about this size, full of all kinds of things so that the little Madonna's face is fairly coloured up. I put her on my knee yesterday, and I must have done it with too little ceremony, for she blushed up all over and the tears came flooding, though she didn't want me to see them, and she was all on fire. Everyone had gone out for a moment. She and I were left there alone, and she suddenly flung herself on my neck, the first time she'd done it without prompting, embraced me with both her little arms, kissed me, and swore she would be an obedient, faithful, and loving wife, and that she'd make me happy, and that she'd throw her whole life into it, every single minute of her life, that she'd sacrifice everything, and that all she wanted to possess in return for all this was my respect. And other than that, she said, I want nothing, no presents, nothing at all. I think you'll agree that to hear a confession like that, alone with a little 16-year-old angel like that, in a little tulle dress with her frizzled up curls, a blush of maidenly modesty on her cheeks, and the tears of enthusiasm in her eyes, I think you'll agree that all that is just ever so slightly tempting. Don't you think so? I mean, it's worth something, eh? Come on, it is, isn't it? Well, listen. We shall go and see my fiancé. Only not right now. In a word, what you're saying is that this monstrous difference in years and development also arouses your lust. And yet you're still going ahead with this marriage. What? But of course. Everyone must look out for himself. And the best time is had by those who are best able to deceive themselves. I say, you've really plunged into virtue up to your neck all of a sudden, haven't you? Have a heart, old chap. I'm a sinful man. You don't say so. Though you did find a home for Katerina Ivanovna's children. But you had your own reasons for doing that. I understand it all now. On the whole, I'm fond of children. I'm very fond of children. Svidrigailov chortled. On that account, I can even relate to you a certain very curious episode that is actually still taking place. On the first day after my arrival here, I called in at one or two of those dives. Well, after my 7 years away from the town, I fairly pounced on them. You've probably observed that I'm not in any hurry to get together with my cronies, my former friends and acquaintances. Indeed, I'm trying to hold out for as long as possible without seeing them. You know, all the time I was living out there on Marfa Petrovna's country estate, I kept being tormented by memories of all those mysterious locales and little snuggeries, where a man who knows his way around can find great many things. The devil take it! The common folk are drunk all the time. The educated youth is burning itself out in vain dreams and fantasies, crippling itself on theories. Jews have come flocking in from somewhere, hiding money away. And everyone else is indulging in sexual license. Within a few hours of my arrival, I'd fairly got the reek of this city. The old familiar reek. I ended up at a certain soirée dansante, so called. A terrible dive. I like my dives with a bit of filth in them. Well, and of course, there was a can-can of the kind there never was in my time. Yes, sir, there'd been some progress in such matters. Suddenly I looked and saw a little girl of about 13, dressed in the most charming way, dancing with a certain virtuoso. There was another right in front of her, vis-à-vis. On a chair over by the wall sat her mother. Well, it was quite some can-can. The girl got embarrassed, turned red in the face, finally took offense and began to cry. The virtuoso picked her off her feet, began whirling her around and showing off in front of her. Everyone roared with laughter. I'm rather fond of our Russian audiences, even can-can ones at such moments. They all cackled and shouted, "Now you're talking, that's the way, and don't give us children next time." Well, I didn't give a spit, and anyway, it was no business of mine whether they were entertaining themselves in a logical or illogical manner. I at once saw my opening, sat down beside the mother, and began by telling her I was also from out of town, that these people were ignoramuses, that they were incapable of discerning true merit and treating it with the respect it deserved. I let her know that I had a lot of money, offered to take them home in my carriage, did so, made their acquaintance. They're living in some little closet of a room that they rent from tenants. They've only just arrived. She told me that she and her daughters could not view my acquaintance as any other than an honor. I learned that they were absolutely destitute and had come to press their case in some government office or other. I offered them my services. Money. I learned that they'd gone to the soirée by mistake, thinking that it was some kind of dancing school. I offered to assist in the young lady's education and give her lessons in French and dancing. They accepted with rapture, considered it an honor, and I'm still friendly with them. If you like, we can go there, only not right now. Enough of your vile, base anecdotes, you lecherous, base, lustful men. A Schiller, a Russian Schiller, a Schiller no less. Où va-t-elle la vertu se nicher? You know, I shall continue to tell you things like that on purpose, just in order to hear your screams. It's a real pleasure. I bet it is. Don't you think I feel absurd at this moment? Raskolnikov muttered in rage. Svidrigailov roared at the top of his voice with laughter. At last he summoned Philippe, settled his bill, and began to get up. Well, I'm drunk, and assez causé, he said. A real pleasure. I don't wonder that you feel pleasure, Raskolnikov screamed, also getting up. Of course it's pleasant for a shabby old lecher to narrate his exploits, with another monstrous design of the same type in view. Particularly in circumstances like this and to a person like me. It gets you aroused. Well, if that's how you see it, Svidrigailov replied, with a certain astonishment now, studying Raskolnikov. If that's how you see it, then you yourself are a cynic to be reckoned with. At least you've got the material for one inside you in abundance. You're able to perceive a lot of things. Well, and that means you can do a lot of things, too. But anyway, that's enough. I sincerely regret not having had longer to talk with you, and you're not going to get away from me. Just wait a little, that's all.
Svidrigailov walked out of the inn. Raskolnikov followed him. Svidrigailov was not really very drunk. The wine had gone to his head momentarily, but the intoxication was growing less every moment. He was very preoccupied with something intensely important, and he was frowning. It was evident that some kind of anticipation was agitating and worrying him. During the last few moments, his attitude towards Raskolnikov had undergone a change, and with each moment that passed, was becoming coarser and more mocking. Raskolnikov had taken notice of all this, and was also in a state of anxiety. Svidrigailov had become highly suspicious to him. He decided to follow him. They emerged onto the pavement.
You to the right, and I to the left. Or, if you like, let's make it the other way around. Only, adieu, mon plaisir. Au rendezvous joyeux.
And he set off rightward, in the direction of the Haymarket. Thank you so very much for listening. If you enjoyed, please like, comment, share, all that jazz. And if you've really enjoyed, do subscribe, because there is more to come. It's a long book, but we're near the end. My god, that chapter was awful. I hate Svidrigailov with all my heart, and I want him to perish in the most awful, awful way. He is... what a terrible, terrible, awful human being. Very well written, but awful human being. If you're listening on podcasts, please leave a review, as it helps get this in front of as many people as possible, and reading your reviews really makes my day. If you want to help me get monetized on Spotify as well as on YouTube, just listen to the show there while you're asleep and help me get the watch time or listen time requirements that I needed there. If you want to support the show further in a more concrete, direct way, you can click on the Ko-Fi link, which is now on screen, or in the link in the description box. But until next time, thank you once again very so much for listening, and bye-bye.